Most men remember betrayal as a single moment. A message discovered, a name spoken, a night that suddenly explains everything. It feels abrupt, violent, out of nowhere, and that belief is what keeps you blind. Because betrayal doesn't begin when she meets someone else. It begins much earlier and much quieter. She didn't wake up one day and decide to betray you. There was no explosion, no dramatic shift in behavior, no obvious signal you could point to and say, "This is when it happened." What changed didn't happen in the open. It happened internally, where no one was watching. At first, nothing looked wrong. She still showed up, still talked, still played her role. But something subtle went missing. Not affection, not loyalty. Presence, emotional presence. The kind you only notice once it's already gone. That's the part most men never see. Betrayal doesn't start with desire for someone else. It starts with something inside her going quiet. The internal dialogue about us. The emotional friction. The sense of engagement. When that goes silent, the relationship is no longer alive. It's just functioning. From the outside, it looks stable. From the inside, it's already over. Men wait for chaos to signal danger, arguments, distance, disrespect. But the most dangerous phase is calm. Not peaceful. Calm. Empty calm. When emotions stop moving. When reactions flatten. When nothing feels urgent anymore. That silence is not peace. It's disengagement. A woman doesn't betray you when she meets someone else. She betrays you when something inside her goes quiet. And once you understand that betrayal is a process, not a moment, everything changes. This video isn't about fear or paranoia. It's about learning to recognize the internal shifts that happen long before betrayal becomes visible, so you're never shocked by something that was already unfolding in silence. Emotional withdrawal is the first real shift, and it always comes before disloyalty. Not attraction elsewhere, not temptation, not opportunity. Betrayal doesn't begin with another man. It begins when emotional investment quietly pulls back. At first, it's subtle. She stops reaching emotionally, not dramatically, not coldly. She just invests less curiosity, less internal checking in, less emotional effort. The relationship still exists, but it no longer occupies the same mental space. What once felt alive starts running on momentum. Inside her mind, the internal dialogue changes. She no longer asks herself, "How do we fix this?" or "What does this mean for us?" Those questions fade. She stops processing the relationship actively. The emotional energy that once moved outward toward connection turns inward instead, toward self-protection, toward self-justification, toward emotional independence. This is the dangerous part. Nothing looks wrong from the outside. There are no arguments because she's no longer emotionally invested enough to fight. There's no obvious conflict because conflict requires engagement. She still shows up, still responds, still functions, and that's exactly why men miss it. Behavior looks normal, but presence is gone. Men track events, raised voices, distance, disrespect. But emotional withdrawal doesn't announce itself. It removes weight. Conversations feel lighter, but also emptier. Reactions are flatter. Responses are polite instead of charged. The relationship feels calmer, and men mistake that calm for stability. It isn't. It's disengagement. This is where the internal separation happens. She begins experiencing herself as emotionally alone inside the relationship. Not angry, not resentful, just separate. And once that separation stabilizes internally, loyalty becomes fragile because loyalty depends on emotional presence, not rules. Not. By the time attraction elsewhere appears, the real betrayal has already occurred. The bond that would have resisted temptation is no longer active. The connection that would have created guilt is already quiet. That's why betrayal feels sudden to men. They notice the final step, not the first one. They see the visible act and miss the invisible withdrawal that made it possible. Betrayal begins when emotional presence is removed, not when loyalty is broken. Once you understand this sequence, you stop obsessing over external threats. You stop watching for other men, and you start paying attention to something far more important, whether emotional energy is still moving toward the relationship or whether it has already turned inward and gone silent. Once emotional withdrawal sets in, the mind doesn't stay neutral. It starts rewriting the past. This is the second shift, and it's quieter than the first, but far more dangerous. Before betrayal, meaning changes. Moments that were once ordinary get reinterpreted. A disagreement that felt minor becomes proof of incompatibility. A missed detail becomes evidence of neglect. Small disappointments, once absorbed and forgotten, are replayed and magnified. The mind begins scanning the archive, not to understand but to reframe. Neutral moments become evidence. Silence becomes emotional absence. Routine becomes stagnation. Stability becomes suffocation. Nothing new actually happens, but everything means something different now. And because the emotional withdrawal already occurred, this reinterpretation feels natural instead of forced. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's psychological self-protection. The nervous system doesn't like contradiction. Betrayal creates internal conflict unless the story changes first. So the mind adjusts the narrative to reduce guilt. It reframes the relationship in a way that makes disengagement feel justified, necessary, even. I've been unhappy for a long time. He never really saw me. I gave more than I received. These thoughts don't arrive fully formed. They emerge gradually, each one softening the weight of what's coming next. The relationship is no longer something being lost, it's something being escaped. This process prepares an identity shift. She begins to see herself less as a partner within a bond and more as an individual who has been held back. Once that identity settles, loyalty feels optional instead of sacred, not because morals disappeared, but because the story changed. This is why confronting facts rarely works at this stage. You remember the relationship as it was lived. She experiences it as it's been rewritten. And rewritten stories feel just as real as lived ones, sometimes more. Before a woman betrays, she rewrites the story so the betrayal makes sense. By the time an external connection appears, the internal justification is already in place. The guilt has been dulled. The bond has been reframed. And the act that follows doesn't feel like betrayal anymore. it feels like alignment. Understanding this doesn't mean arguing the past or defending yourself. It means recognizing when meaning is shifting internally. Because once the story changes, behavior is no longer far behind. After the story is rewritten, something else begins to fade: emotional consequence. This is the third shift, and it's the one that makes betrayal feel possible without feeling cruel. Empathy doesn't disappear dramatically. It numbs, slowly, quietly, until the impact of action stops being felt and starts being thought about instead. Emotional numbness replaces empathy. She still understands, intellectually, that betrayal would hurt you, but understanding is no longer accompanied by sensation. The nervous system has already pulled away, so consequences no longer land with weight. They feel distant, abstract, almost hypothetical. This is where loyalty starts to change shape. It no longer feels like a lived bond. It becomes an idea. A rule, something moral, but no longer visceral. And rules are easy to bend once they stop being felt in the body. Internally, the language shifts. I deserve to feel alive. Nothing would change anyway. I've already given enough. These aren't excuses she rehearses aloud. They are emotional permissions forming under the surface. Each one lowers resistance. Each one creates distance between action and impact. The pain you would feel becomes something theoretical, something she knows about, but no longer feels responsible for. This is not villainy. It's psychological disengagement. When emotional presence was still active, the idea of betrayal would have triggered immediate discomfort. Guilt, anxiety, inner friction. But once that presence is gone, those internal alarms go quiet. The system is no longer protecting the bond, it's protecting the self. Consequences feel far away because the emotional connection that would transmit them is already offline. This is why betrayal often shocks men. You assume empathy would stop it. You believe love would intervene at the last second. But by the time disloyalty becomes visible, the emotional circuitry that would have blocked it has already shut down. Betrayal becomes possible the moment consequences stop being felt emotionally. At this stage, nothing needs to be forced. Opportunity doesn't have to be sought. The endorenal brakes are already released. What follows feels less like a decision and more like momentum finally being allowed to move. Understanding this shift matters because it shows you where the real danger lies, not in temptation, not in other men, but in emotional numbness. When empathy fades and consequences go quiet, loyalty no longer has anything holding it in place. By the time betrayal becomes imaginable, she is no longer searching for someone else. She is searching for herself. This is the fourth shift, and it's the one that finally breaks the illusion that another man is the cause. He isn't. He's a surface, a mirror, a reflection point for something that already detached internally. What she seeks at this stage is validation, not approval, but confirmation that she still exists in a way that feels alive. She wants to see herself reflected differently than she does inside the relationship. Not as a partner, not as a role, but as a version of herself that feels charged, desired, seen in a new way. Reflection becomes the priority. Someone who responds to her differently, who reacts with curiosity instead of familiarity, who mirrors back excitement instead of history. That reflection creates emotional contrast, and contrast restores sensation. The nervous system wakes up again, not because of who the man is, but because of how she feels in his presence. This is where identity confirmation enters. She isn't asking, "Who do I want?" She's asking, "Who am I becoming around this energy?" The relationship she's in no longer answers that question. It feels fixed, known, defined. The new interaction doesn't offer commitment, it offers discovery. And discovery feels like life returning. This is why the third party is almost always interchangeable. Remove him, and another could fill the same role. What matters is not his character, his values, or even his availability. What matters is the feeling he reflects back: aliveness, desirability, possibility. That feeling cannot be negotiated with logic, because it isn't logical. It's somatic. Men misunderstand this and personalize it. They compare themselves. They ask what the other man has that they don't. But the answer is rarely specific. The man didn't win. He reflected. The third party isn't chosen for who he is, but for what he reflects back. Understanding this reframes everything. Betrayal isn't about replacement. It's about mirroring. It's about an internal identity that no longer feels seen within the bond and goes searching for its reflection elsewhere. And once that reflection is found, the attachment doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like recognition. That's why stopping betrayal isn't about outperforming another man. It's about recognizing when emotional presence and identity reflection have already gone silent long before a mirror ever appeared. Betrayal becomes inevitable not through a single decision, but through erosion. Micro-boundary erosion. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that feels like crossing a line. Just small permissions that quietly shrink the space where loyalty used to live. It starts with innocent secrecy, not lies omissions. She doesn't mention a conversation because it feels unnecessary. She doesn't share a thought because it feels private. Nothing about it feels wrong yet. In fact, it feels protective, easier, cleaner. The first boundary doesn't break, it bends. Then emotional compartmentalization sets in. Parts of her inner world stop being shared with you and start being held elsewhere. Not always with another man at first. Sometimes it's internal. Sometimes it's a private emotional space where certain thoughts are allowed to exist without scrutiny. This compartment feels safe because it's quiet. No consequences. No accountability. Small permissions follow. It's just talking. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not doing anything wrong. Each permission reduces friction. Each one makes the next feel smaller. Boundaries don't disappear, they shrink. What once felt like a clear line becomes a blurred edge. Withholding information becomes normal, not out of malice, but convenience. Explaining would require engagement. Engagement would reactivate emotional consequence. Silence is easier. Silence keeps the compartments separate. Then comes rationalized intimacy, emotional closeness that doesn't get labeled as intimacy because it hasn't turned physical. Shared jokes, shared understanding, shared tension, all justified by one idea: nothing has happened yet, but something has. Boundaries are no longer protecting the bond, they're protecting the secret. This is why betrayal feels sudden only at the end. From the inside, it feels gradual, safe, even logical. The moral weight never drops all at once. It evaporates through 100 small decisions that never felt significant enough to stop. Betrayal doesn't break boundaries. It shrinks them slowly. By the time the final step happens, there's no resistance left to overcome. The boundary was already reduced to something symbolic. And crossing it doesn't feel like destruction. It feels like continuation. Understanding this shift is critical because it shows you where inevitability actually begins. Not with temptation, not with opportunity, but with the first small permission that went unchallenged. When boundaries shrink quietly, betrayal doesn't need force. It simply arrives where there is no longer anything holding it back. Most men never see betrayal coming because they're looking in the wrong place. They watch for events. Women shift internally first, and emotional silence gets misread as peace. Men are trained to monitor what happens. Arguments, distance, disrespect, changes in routine, raised voices, missed calls. They expect betrayal to announce itself with chaos, with warning signs that feel loud enough to react to. But that's not how it starts. Women don't explode first. They go quiet. The emotional shifts that precede betrayal are internal and subtractive. Less emotional checking in, less sharing, less tension, less friction. From the outside, things look calmer, smoother, easier, and men interpret that calm as resolution, as maturity, as stability finally arriving. But emotional silence isn't peace, it's absence. When a woman is emotionally engaged, there's energy even when it's uncomfortable. There are reactions, opinions, friction. When that energy withdraws, the relationship doesn't feel worse, it feels lighter, and that's the trap. Men relax when the emotional weather clears. They think the storm passed. They don't realize the system shut down. Women shift internally long before behavior changes. They detach emotionally before they detach physically. By the time actions become visible, the internal process is already complete. The decision didn't happen in a moment, it stabilized over time. This is why men are blindsided. They're waiting for disruption. But betrayal begins with disappearance, with emotional presence slowly leaving the room. Another reason men miss it is because silence feels safe. No conflict means no threat. No complaints mean no problem. But silence after emotional withdrawal isn't safety, it's resignation. She's no longer trying to fix, express, or be understood. She's conserving energy. For herself, men look for explosions. Betrayal starts with absence. And absence doesn't trigger alarms. It soothes them. That's why men replay the end and say, everything was fine. From their perspective, nothing bad happened. But from hers, everything meaningful had already stopped happening. The bond wasn't breaking, it was no longer being maintained. What you didn't notice wasn't chaos, it was emotional quiet. Understanding this doesn't mean becoming paranoid or controlling. It means recalibrating what you pay attention to, not just words, not just behavior, but emotional presence, direction of energy, whether engagement is still alipo or whether it has gone silent. Because betrayal rarely announces itself with noise. It arrives after the room has already gone quiet, and no one realized what the silence meant until it was too late. Men often accelerate this process without realizing it, because their response to emotional quiet is to remove all charge. They sense distance and instinctively try to stabilize, to smooth, to reassure, to make things safe again. And that instinct, while well-intended, often speeds detachment instead of stopping it. Overstabilizing is the first accelerator. When emotional presence drops, many men respond by becoming extra consistent, extra agreeable, extra predictable. Same routines, same tone, same availability. They reduce volatility to prevent loss. But volatility wasn't the threat flatness was. When everything becomes smooth, nothing pulls attention forward. The nervous system stops leaning in. Emotional predictability is the second accelerator. Predictability feels respectful, reliable, mature. But in moments where internal withdrawal has already begun, predictability doesn't restore connection. It confirms stagnation. It tells her, subconsciously, nothing here will surprise me anymore. And when surprise disappears, curiosity follows it out the door. The third accelerator is removing polarity entirely. Men often confuse polarity with conflict, so they eliminate anything that could feel disruptive. No disagreement, no tension, no emotional contrast, just calm. But polarity isn't chaos, it's charge, direction, difference. Without it, the emotional field collapses into neutrality. This creates emotional flatness, not peace flatness. And flatness is dangerous because it invites the internal exit. The nervous system, starved of stimulation, starts looking elsewhere, not necessarily to another man at first, but to imagination, memory, fantasy, anywhere that still produces movement. Men think they're protecting the relationship by becoming safer. In reality, they're making it easier to detach from. Stability without tension becomes a holding pattern, not a bond. It keeps things from breaking, but it also keeps them from moving. This is why reassurance often backfires, why constant availability feels comforting but uninspiring, why being endlessly understanding doesn't pull her back. It gives her space to leave internally. Emotional safety without polarity often precedes emotional departure. This isn't about being cold or volatile. It's about understanding that connection requires more than calm. It requires presence that registers, energy that moves, a sense of direction that doesn't disappear when things get quiet. Men accelerate betrayal not by being bad partners, but by turning themselves into emotional flat lines at the exact moment when engagement needs charge to return. When everything becomes smooth, nothing anchors her emotionally anymore. And once the anchor lifts, drift doesn't need permission. Understanding this shift isn't about creating tension. It's about not erasing it in the name of safety and accidentally clearing the path for emotional departure. This truth isn't meant to make you suspicious. It's meant to make you oriented. Betrayal is not chaos. It's information. And once you understand what it actually reveals, you stop reacting late and start seeing early. Betrayal doesn't appear randomly. It signals internal disengagement that has already stabilized. By the time it becomes visible, the emotional bond that would have prevented it is already inactive. That doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it precise. It tells you exactly when emotional presence stopped being protected. Men make the mistake of monitoring behavior instead of energy. They watch texts, schedules, interactions. They look for evidence of wrongdoing. But betrayal isn't born in behavior, it's born in absence. The absence of emotional tension, the absence of curiosity, the absence of engagement that pushes back. When emotional presence is alive, there is friction, even discomfort, even disagreement. When that disappears, things feel easier, but also flatter. That flatness isn't peace, it's disengagement. And disengagement is the real precursor. This is where the shift for men happens. You stop tracking what she's doing and start observing how present she is emotionally. Does energy still move toward the relationship, or has it turned inward? Is there still polarity difference, charge, direction, or has everything been smoothed into neutrality? Is she emotionally engaged or simply functioning? Protecting polarity doesn't mean creating drama. It means maintaining direction, maintaining a sense that emotional presence matters. That engagement isn't optional. That connection still has weight. This knowledge isn't about control. It's about timing. It shows you that betrayal doesn't start with another man. It starts when emotional presence disappears quietly, internally, long before anyone else enters the picture. And the man who understands that stops being blindsided. He stops asking, how could this happen, and starts seeing when it began. He doesn't panic at silence, but he doesn't confuse it with peace either. He stays attentive to the movement of emotional energy, not the surface of behavior. Because once you understand this sequence, betrayal loses its mystery. And when mystery disappears, fear follows it out the door. You don't become paranoid, you become precise. Betrayal doesn't begin with another man. It begins when emotional presence disappears. And the man who understands that stops being blindsided and starts seeing the shift long before it happens.